Hi, and welcome to the Gen X Rewind podcast. My name's Evan.
And I'm Brady.
Hey, Brady, it's been a couple of weeks since we did our last podcast, so it's good to see you again for sure.
Right. Yep.
And for informational purposes, just to remind everybody, Generation X are people born between the ages of, or born between the years of 1965 and 1980. And, you know, I was just thinking about it this week. So when I was in high school, I was when I was a sophomore or a sophomore in high school, the people who were seniors were actually baby boomers.
Wow.
So what's interesting about that is, I, in hindsight, I recognize that there was a difference,
Really?
right? They looked a little bit different and they acted a little bit different than the people after them. So, you know, um, that just kind of recently dawned on me.
Hmm.
And even though there's a much bigger age difference between myself and my wife and those people that would have been seniors when I was a sophomore in high school, uh, the generational difference is what matters,
Hmm.
right? It's not so much the age. If you marry somebody within your generation, you will share a lot of things in common just because of that.
Right.
Even though there might be more years between you than would be from somebody from a previous generation or let's say the next generation, right? So if you were born in, let's say, like 1978, but your spouse was born in 1985, she would be a millennial, you would be a Gen Xer. And there's a huge difference,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Between those. And in fact, in the pre-show thing, we were talking, and I said, I've been working on a book. I think I mentioned this in the last podcast. It's kind of a growing up Gen X book. And I finished kind of the first draft and done an editing thing. And when it's available for sale, we'll be sure to post it on our websites here and stuff. But uh, what's interesting, I think, is that the preface to the book is explaining why Gen Xers are the way they are,
Yeah.
just so people understand what the differences are, right?
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of it has to do with this, well, I don't really care what you think attitude.
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't really factor into this. This is something that the generations that have followed us, I think you think this is true too. They're much more concerned about what other people think.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting to think about how, yeah, you're a product of your generation based on the culture pressures and things that you face, I think that's what makes too the commercials about how you become your parents later on. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same kind of thing where that influence you had with your parents kind of, it's funny how that pops up later on. You catch yourself doing the same things that your mom or your dad did. And how we, as going through life in the same generation with all the same influences and culture things, how we kind of share those, the same, uh, yeah, just the traits.
Yeah. And like our kids are Gen Zs, right? And I think in a lot of ways, that generation, they'll eventually grow into being a little bit like Gen Xers, right? There will be some changes, but they will have been, for the most part, they will have been parented by Gen,
Right.
unfortunately, maybe for that, been parented by Gen Xers who, if you fell down and got hurt, they were like, too bad, so sad, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. We're,
we're from the, I'll give you something to cry about,
yeah.
generation, right? That's what our parents did for us. And I think a lot of Gen Xers kind of passed that down.
Well, yeah. And I was just talking about this the other day. The thought of having gym class as a middle schooler, and we've talked about this, where you're standing shoulder to shoulder at a shower
Oh
pole,
my gosh.
it's like a concentration camp.
Oh, that's exactly what I thought. Exactly. I'm like, is this Birkenau? Like, what is going on here? Like, this is like my worst nightmare. I saw this on the TV series, The Holocaust, right? When does the Xylon B come out of this thing?
That, shoulder to shoulder with your gym buddies,
Oh my gosh.
power pole with the gym teacher in a folding chair, checking
Yeah, sitting there looking at you.
that does something to you, I think. Uh,
Yeah, it definitely does something to you. Yeah.
yeah, it manifests itself in our generation somehow, right?
Yeah, maybe I don't know what that is, but
Oh,
it was interesting because I was looking at the ages of some of a few of the most popular or most famous billionaires right now. And a lot of them are Gen Xers or very close to Gen X. Like he was born in 64. So he's right on the edge,
yeah,
right? And depending on what his parents were like, Elon Musk is definitely a Gen Xer, and you can tell,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
it's funny because, I've seen people like mock him for just some of the things that he says and does. Like, he makes jokes like a 12-year-old. Like, yeah, it's because he's a Gen Xer. It doesn't have anything to do with his, Asperger's or whatever. It's like, that's a Gen X trait. And
yeah,
somebody was criticizing him and says, "What kind of a grown man does this?" And I said, "Listen, honey, every Gen X guy does exactly what he just did, like nonstop. We make jokes like that constantly. This is
yeah,
what we did when we were kids, and you don't grow out of it.
yeah,
Right? You just don't. You learn maybe sometimes when it's appropriate or not appropriate, but even then sometimes it's like, nah, I'm still making that joke. That was too much of a good setup, right? Like hard not to do it.
yeah,
But so it's interesting because see, those guys are extremely successful, right? And I think part of that is because of the Gen X mentality of like you do it on your own, you're independent, who cares what other people think, right?
yeah,
These are pretty good qualities. And I've seen some surveys of like hiring managers saying, I'm not hiring some of these younger generation groups again, or I'm going to be very wary of it. And, the response is, yeah, hire Gen Xers
yeah.
because we're hardworking and no nonsense. And yes, occasionally may make an inappropriate joke, uh, but we're going to get the job done and we're not going to, take crap and mess around and waste your time.
Right. Well, here's a question for you. I could be way off base, but do you see a lot of Gen Xers with anxiety dogs, or
No,
therapy animals and
no,
all of that coping? Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I could be wrong. There might be large numbers out there.
maybe.
I just, I don't see that. I wonder if that's also because of the fact that we were just, raised with that gut it up and, suck it
Yeah.
up, deal with it and get her done and all that.
You learn to cope. And that's one of the things I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time in the book saying that like you just you had that independent mindset and independent spirit and you were kind of just thrust out there on your own.
Yeah.
And so you have to make decisions,
Right.
what do I do? It's like, well, you just figure it out, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes you screw up and sometimes you make really bad decisions and then you learn from it and you don't do it again, right? And I tell the story of like something that I did wrong when I was a kid and got punished for it. And, my whole point in telling my son the story was so don't do that,
Right.
right? Like learn from my mistake,
Yeah.
learn that that was a bad decision making process that I went through. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't evil or anything. It was just stupid,
Yeah.
right? So learn from my mistake and just don't make a decision like that in the future, right?
Right.
But something tells me that you maybe you have to learn that through experience. I don't know. Sometimes you got to learn through experience.
And what I've
Maybe
noticed,
either.
teenagers like to weaponize statements like that and go to
Oh
the other
yeah.
and say, "Well, Dad did that, and yeah, so what's the big deal?"
Yeah, and then you say the response to that is, and how did that work out for him?
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah,
So, hey, I dated two girls at once. You're like, well, dad did that. It's like, how did that work out? Right? It didn't work out so good. So maybe don't do that, right? Like learn from that mistake. Maybe, taking the car out when you weren't supposed to,
oh
things
man,
like this, the stupid mistakes that we made. It's like maybe you can learn from that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I don't have a whole lot of threshold for, you know, making a mistake because you didn't think it through. It's like I've given you plenty of life examples for me.
yeah,
You should have figured it out, right? Like, hey, when dad tried this, that didn't go so well for him. So maybe I won't do the same thing, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Even rats have that instinct.
yeah, it's like they figure out like when they press the button that gives them a shock,
Right.
maybe I shouldn't press that button again, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's how the other one died. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
What's funny about that is it's like I remember in psychology class when I was going to Iowa State that uh, they told us about, they would give rats cocaine when they pressed a bar in their cage, right? Well, eventually, because it feeds that part of their brain that is a reward, like the reward center, they would just press it until they killed themselves,
wow.
right? They would just keep pressing it and keep getting cocaine until they just absolutely killed themselves because that feeling that they got and that whatever was just they were so addicted to that feeling that they would just press it nonstop, right?
Hmm.
Which is
Yeah.
funny. And they would not do it to that extent with food, even though they would do it probably more than they would normally get fed.
Hmm.
But they didn't usually kill themselves with food, right? But with the cocaine, no, they would just do it until they died.
Huh.
It's like bizarre, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, look at humans. They kill themselves overdosing on drugs like heroin and LSD and cocaine. So
Yeah.
we're not much more advanced than a rat, right? When it comes to that. Maybe that's why they use rats, right?
Yeah.
Hey, they react very similarly to humans when it comes to stupid decision making, right? Just a
Yeah.
reminder to everybody, we're just two Gen X guys, and we just like to talk. Current events, sports, culture, politics, whatever. We weave in and out from our Gen X perspective. We do some segments from time to time, depending on how much time we have. And you, as the listening and viewing audience, are just kind of flies on the wall, listening to two guys talk. We think it's pretty uh, interesting to listen to two interesting people talk. And on that note, too, Brady, I saw that uh, Joe Rogan has interviewed some pretty interesting people lately.
Yeah. I saw it. Elon Musk was in there, one of them.
He did Elon Musk. He did Woody Harrelson, which everybody liked. He did Tulsi Gabbard, which was a fascinating interview. He did some other pop
Hmm.
culture type people, and uh, all of the comments, when I read the comments for those, it's so interesting. People like, I just can't stop listening,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't even care so much about anybody's particular political opinion or this or that. It's just very interesting to listen to two people just talk about something,
Right. Right.
right? There's just something interesting because you may agree with them or you may disagree with them, but that's what makes it interesting,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know?
I think in our situation too, growing up, you didn't have all this information at your fingertips. I mean,
No.
there was a story, something happened, you'd read about it in the paper, or you might see it at night, But then you got to wait all the way until the next day before another paper comes or the news
Yeah.
to hear what the story, how it unfolded or how it's going. For me, listening to Musk is it's amazing to have access to somebody who's dealing with government in real time and looking at all the waste and fraud and all of that. It just listening to him talk as to what he's seeing and stories and examples. It's fascinating. It's hard, regardless of what your political position is. It's fascinating to hear their side of things, and it's fun. It's fun getting all sides because then it
Yeah.
starts to show which side is really lost and just out of touch, out of date, and which one is really on the right path. I don't know. Get your
Yeah.
take. I thought that was
No,
fast.
100%. And yeah, it's fascinating. And I mean, we've talked about Doge a couple of times on previous podcasts and what is being discovered. I think it's worse than most people thought. I think that's what Musk said to Rogan was like, oh, we thought it was going to be bad and there would be a lot of, he honestly said, I thought there would be a lot of waste. There's a decent amount of waste. There's a tremendous amount of fraud, like
Yeah.
flat out fraud. Like all of the people on Social Security who aren't alive
Right.
or who don't even exist
Right.
or whatever. You know, everybody was freaking out. This cracks me up. Having been in the business world for 25, 30 years, for government employees to be freaked out that they were asked to say five things that they accomplished in the last week.
Yeah.
That's every day for a normal employee,
Right.
right? If you do agile at your workplace, you're every day you're doing a stand up and you're telling everybody else on your team, this is what I did yesterday. Here's what I plan to do today. And then maybe some things that you need help with or a blocker or something, right?
Yeah.
Every day.
Right.
And federal employees were incensed and
Yeah.
went on social media crying because someone asked them to explain what they actually accomplished. That's how entitled
Yeah.
and irrelevant and incompetent probably 80% of federal government is, right?
Yeah.
And uh, on top of that, then you have wasteful things that we're spending money on. We talked about in the past. I mean, uh, just incredibly ridiculous things that money's wasted on, not in this country, right?
Right. Three. Seven.
Essentially, we have been funding the entire world to exist,
Right.
right? This is what I gather from it. Like everybody else, their entire country is going to crumble because they're not getting paid out from my tax dollars,
Yeah.
right? This is what we're learning. But the other side of it is that's only half of it because most of that money doesn't even go to that cause in that country. Half of it gets kicked back to somebody as like it fraudulently taking that money
Yeah. Yeah.
and putting it in a bank account somewhere and funding their own political campaign or their own agenda or whatever it be. We're paying for something. We're saying it's going overseas. A portion of it, a small portion of it actually goes overseas and the rest gets kicked back to the people who actually came up with the funding for it. Every time you hear some politician, and this isn't even on the federal level, too, it's like, oh, by the way, the mayor of some major cities, their spouse created a nonprofit and they're getting paid $5 million a year in kickbacks from US aid for whatever work that this nonprofit supposedly does in Nigeria. It's just a big scam. It's a fraud. Like the whole thing is a fraud.
And to hear him say that they don't even have any like documentation or
No,
where this money is going. So, the $12 million goes out and, where did it go? Well,
nobody knows.
we don't know. So, yeah,
I mean, who can exist like that? What company
no,
could do business like that? What family could do? Hey, honey, what did you spend $10,000 worth in February? Nah, I don't know.
Yeah.
right? How long would that last? How long would your relationship last if your spouse said, I don't know,
Yeah.
this and that,
Yeah.
all for a good cause, though, of course.
Yeah.
Hey, what's this bill from Starbucks for $8,000? It's like, come on. And what's funny is like you were talking about like hearing other sides and seeing where things have gone off the rails,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I saw an example. This is on X. It was posted, and it was something from Bill Maher's show. Sometimes Bill Maher gets it right,
Right.
and the other 98% of the time he probably doesn't. And I'm
Yeah.
never sure what's for entertainment value or what's his actual opinion, right? But he was asking people, what do you do when people get it wrong with an election? Well, what do you do when the people get it wrong, right? Shouldn't there be some means to sort of override what the people say when they get it wrong,
Yeah.
right? I, do you listen to your own tape? Do you listen to what you just said?
Yeah.
Who decides that the people got it wrong,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Maybe the dictator. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And speaking of dictators, there was a little episode this last week that, oh my gosh, it's been everywhere nonstop, right? The tiny little dancer from Ukraine
Yeah.
uh, wore his sweatpants into the Oval Office of the White House
Yeah.
and made a veiled threat uh, to the president, and apparently he called the vice president in Ukrainian a bitch under his breath. I
Wow.
saw that piece too. Somebody interpreted the word that he said under his breath. And Rubio and Vance and Trump were having nothing of it,
No.
right? And they kicked him out. They're
Yeah.
like, you come here, you don't want peace, you just want this to continue. Here's why. Because the whole scam is that Ukraine is a money laundering state. This is exactly why he's in power, why previous administrations have just handed him billions of dollars because it's money laundering, and he'll facilitate that for you. So when you see all these other European countries, oh, we support Zelensky and everything, yeah, because they're laundering money through his dictatorship.
Mm,
It's not a democracy, right? He canceled elections. His
right.
own, legislature, whatever, is wants to impeach him after what happened. Um, you don't come here and sit in our country and insult us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Period. I don't care who you are.
Oh, yeah. Watching that, there was a couple key takeaways I thought from watching that. I actually watched it a couple times. The first time through, you see the body language, arms
Yeah.
folded folded like this, and then and like almost like rolling the eyes, dismissing certain things that are said. And then for me, the most offensive was not so much the yeah, it would have been nice if you wore a suit and tie out of
Yeah.
respect, but I think when you're raising your voice above the vice president and you're talking over the president, to me, if I'm going to China because my country's under attack and I'm going to talk to the prime minister there of China, I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to wear appropriate clothes. I'm not going to be shouting and talking over him and expecting. I mean, to me, that there were so many red flags there.
Yeah. So many.
How does this guy have absolutely no social sense? And I
No.
thought, with everything that you're given, and they say you're not even saying thank you, that's your cue to bow and say, I want to take this moment to thank the United States and thank
Yeah.
the administration for their time, their money, their effort. That's your cue right there. When you say you're not
Yeah.
even, not, you're so young, blah, 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 and then go off. That turned me off so much.
Yeah.
But then as a Gen Xer, I thought, maybe maybe I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist here, but maybe just maybe, this is part of a bigger plan of Trump, possibly to pull in Europe, to pull in everyone else to contribute and to
Which they did immediately after.
exactly. So now you've got a commitment for France to put boots on the ground there to protect. You've got England coming
All
in.
these NATO countries were immediately, well, we're going to fund you and come over here and take the money. And meanwhile, we're going, yep, that's exactly what we want. We're not
Yeah,
paying for it anymore. Because here's the thing, and the reality of it is, and it's like, I wouldn't say I'm specifically an isolationist, right? Because that's a term somebody will throw around, oh, isolationist. It's like, no, but I care more about my own country than any other country,
right,
right? And I would expect every person in every country to feel the exact same way. And
right,
I would never criticize them. If the people in any country, Nepal, are more concerned about the people within the country of Nepal than they are the people of China or Bhutan or India, I would be like, yeah, that's how it works, right? You should be more concerned about your own country. What is the US's interest in a dispute between the Ukraine and Russia? I still would like somebody to spell out what my particular concern is that my tax dollars should be going to fund whatever that is, right?
right. Yeah, yeah.
You could make a case that, European countries that are close to the Ukraine have some type of an interest in that conflict being resolved because
Yeah.
it's close to their border. But, it should be their their fight, not our fight.
Well, and that's the
Right?
thing. You tried to, like you mentioned, you throw the thread out that, yeah, they're going to take Ukraine, then they're going to take Poland, and it's going to be on the doorstep of Europe, and then
That's not happening.
it's going to be your problem. Well, you have a nice, beautiful ocean between you. Well, yeah, we do. We
Yeah, on purpose. It's
we do.
like that.
We do, and it's
Yeah.
your problem. So why are you trying to act like I we're entitled to give
Yeah.
you
Stop
every,
trying to extort money from us, right? Like
yeah,
it's you we want peace. If you don't want peace, then
yeah,
sorry, we're
yeah,
out of it. We're not in the business of funding wars
no,
anymore
no,
and supporting wars. That's not that we're not doing that anymore.
no, and the clock is ticking because Russia has a lot more meat to grind. They're going to be getting closer and closer and closer at some point to Kyiv. And then the offer for peace is going to be off the table.
Yeah.
Once they smell blood in the water that they're actually getting to the end, why would they stop and why wouldn't they just finish the job and add Ukraine to Russia and go from there, you know? So I feel
And
like that,
yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because a lot of people were posting, and this is what I thought, because I've been thinking about that for a long time. It's like somebody make the case why we're supposed to hate Russia right now, right? I want somebody to actually make that case and don't say the Cold War. You know how long ago the Cold War was? That's 35 years ago now. The
right,
Cold War, 35 years, right? Uh, about 5 years after the end of World War II, when we bombed Japan, we were friends with Japan
right.
and working towards peace and a relationship with them and everything else. Why do we insist? Why do we have politicians and media continuing to say that Russia is somehow our enemy?
Yeah.
I like somebody actually spell it out for me. What in the last 30 years and attacking Ukraine is not necessarily a reason for us to not uh, have some sort of type of relationship with Russia, right?
Yeah.
What makes Ukraine more special than Russia,
Yeah.
right? It's not the Soviet Union anymore. It's like it'd be saying like, why are we funding East Germany? Because they're part of Germany and there's no East Germany anymore, and we now have a fine relationship with them. right? And Japan and pretty much everybody else. Why do we continue to make Russia the bogeyman
Yeah.
here? I I'm open to having somebody explain to me why they think this is such a relationship that we should just burn and, put tanks at the border kind of crap.
Yeah.
What's the point of that? Like,
Yeah. And the mineral rights, all of that, for us to be able to go over the Ukraine and be able to take that. Okay, well now we've got a vested interest. We've got something that we can benefit from our country. But on the flip side, I don't know that I don't know that I like to be over there. Uh,
no,
Now we're
no
kind of
need to.
and you know it's kind of like being between Israel and the Palestinians.
Yeah.
I don't want to position myself right in between the way.
No, I don't. I'm for assisting with peace and
Yeah,
then staying the heck out of all this other crap.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
And if England and France and whoever else wants to get involved, go ahead, spend your money, send your kids off to be killed in a
yeah,
pointless war,
yeah.
right? Not us. We've done it a couple of times,
Hmm.
probably at least three times,
Yeah,
and no more. Russia's not threatening to invade us. Russia's not threatening us. Ukraine threatened us.
yeah.
Like, right? Like Zelensky came over here and that was a threat, right? And who knows what he meant. And I read an article that said, hey, this second guy that attempted to assassinate Trump might have Ukrainian connections.
Oh boy. Yeah,
So it's like, yeah. So I'm pretty sure extra reason for Trump not to be overly, you know, congenial with a dictator from some, third
yeah.
world country.
I think he handled it very, very well. And the left, Bernie Sanders and all, they
They're
all
gonna
had,
blow it up, and it's gonna, yeah,
oh, what a stain, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's going to play itself out
yeah, it
because
will.
he can't he can't just go to France and get what he needs to fend off Russia. He's going to have to come back to the
Yeah,
table.
and not just him, all of Europe, all of NATO is gonna have to come crawling back
Right. Right.
because we've been propping all of them up for years with our tax money for
Yeah.
all of these things. And if we pull out, it'll just collapse. Then they'll come back and be coming back on the terms that are favorable to us. And
Right.
this idea that somehow we should be this benevolent force in the world who always gets reamed on every deal and every situation. No, forget about that. And I guarantee you that's what people voted for, right? The people who they want the focus to be on what benefits us and this country that we live in,
Hmm.
right? And if there's money and time and effort left over, we're the most generous country in the history of the world. And there's
Yeah.
no way you can question that, right?
And it does send a message when everyone watches that. They see, when Russia watches that, when China watches
Yeah,
that,
don't mess around.
they see that we're not going to be taken advantage of.
No.
So the next 4 years, don't try it. You know,
Yeah, because and the thing is it's like you're not dealing with a vegetable anymore,
right?
right? It's like you're dealing with a businessman who can read you. And it's what's impressive, what I thought was impressive, right? Is I mean, Trump's been doing that his whole career. And, this hatred for this guy is completely politically motivated. Everybody on the left loved him 15 years ago. He was
Right.
on every TV show, every talk show. The women of The View fawned over him. He had movie cameos, he had TV cameos. He was on Saturday Night Live, everything. As soon as he said he was a Republican, oh, now we hate you. Right.
Right.
So it's, come on.
Yeah.
Um, that's a little the same with like everybody loved Elon Musk and the people on the left were buying Teslas to save the world because they were electric and everything else. As soon as he does anything that's conservative or aligns himself with a Republican, oh, now he's Hitler,
Yeah.
right? It's like just once be intellectually honest with yourself
Yeah.
about things like that. Just once, right? It's like, come on. I, you know, that fascinates me. That kind of like, I think just that everything is politicized. Speaking of politicized stuff, I didn't watch it. I'm sure you probably didn't watch it, but there was an award show
Oh,
on last night.
yeah.
I've not seen, well, I'll take it back. I've seen one thing that was nominated, and I wanted to mention that tonight. I never watch award shows. Uh, I don't detest a group of people more than I detest the people from Hollywood,
Yeah.
right? And the people who have been in Hollywood and gotten out say the same thing,
Yeah.
right? And I'm friends with several sort of, let's call them former celebrities. They're still kind of celebrities in some ways who have been on TV, on reality shows, whatever else, and have talked about what they witnessed in Hollywood for a number of years and even participated in a little bit of it. And they said that makes them sick to their stomach, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
just everything about it. And you see occasionally there's a star like Eastwood or a few others that are big enough and old enough to step out and say it's a pile of crap.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
um, I
Well,
think
look,
we're going to find out that.
I mean, look at the kids that go in and become actors. I mean, look how their lives turn out. It just grinds them up and spits them out, and most of them are turn out either dead or commit suicide.
Yeah.
Freaks. Or,
Drugs on drugs. And
yeah, it's
it's
a big.
just one after another. It's a terrible thing. So the only movie of any of these that I watched, I think it was actually Friday night. Uh, I flipped over to the Peacock app, and they were the only network that was streaming a movie with Ray Fiennes called uh, the what? Gosh, now I can't even think of it. The name of it. Uh, there, it's the Pope has died, and they are selecting a new pope. So you're in the Vatican, and there's a bunch of uh, the bishops and all of this. They're there, and it's all a little backstabbing and quarreling and all of this stuff, and they're just they're going at it. And there's some things about it that are kind of interesting, but it's also like the casting is sort of weird. John Lithgow is one of these bishops, and there's I don't know, a few others, but they a few of them are like they don't want the black guy to be made pope,
Hmm.
because he's black and he's from Africa. And then it turns out that the black guy uh, had fathered a child out of wedlock when he was like 30 with this other woman, and they find out about it. And so, that's why he doesn't get elected, right?
Hmm.
It's called the conclave. Sorry, conclave. And then another guy had lied and set up somebody else, and yada yada yada. And then and I don't care. I'm spoiling it for whomever. I don't care because you should not watch this piece of crap.
Hey, okay, good to know.
So at the end, the Pope that they do get, the Ray Fine character, who's like the dean of bishops or whatever, he finds out that that guy's a hermaphrodite. So he looks like a man, but he has like ovaries and stuff.
Oh,
And you're like, had that not happened, I would have said, oh, it's okay. It was kind of boring. And, I didn't kind of believe that those things actually happen in a conclave and all of this. And it was kind of insulting for the Catholic Church. And then that happened. It was like the crying game. You're
yeah.
like, come on.
Hey,
You're
man.
like, seriously? Like it was already woke enough, but
Uh,
you throw that in there as
it,
if that would ever happen. And I'm
everything.
like, if I'm not Catholic, but if I was a Catholic, I would be so offended and
Yeah,
insulted by this steaming pile of woke crap that just insulted. What if you did that? And, oh, it's during the month of Ramadan, and all of the mullahs are hermaphrodites. Like you could only make fun of some branch of Christianity, right? Everything else is off the table,
yeah.
but that you can make fun of.
No,
If you're
it's
Catholic, do not watch that movie. It's so insulting.
yeah. And no, I mean it's got to be jammed into everything. Look at every
Everything.
series on Netflix or series. It's a matter of time before that whole wokeness is going to be jammed in. And you think of the percent of the population that it makes up, but yet they've got it's Hollywood. You just,
Especially Disney. Especially Disney. I mean, everything is like their movies are flops. So many of their recent movies are flops, and it's become a joke now that like they're gonna do a Disney's gonna do a Beatles movie, and all four of the Beatles are gonna be black and lesbians or something, right? It's like it's like, can we let's just have a story? Who cares
yeah,
about that? Like if you're a writer, if you're black or Hispanic or you're uh homosexual, whatever, write a story about what you know and pitch it and get it sold and get a book and a movie made.
yeah.
I have no problem with you trying to do that, right? But
Well,
if you're trying to force something else into a story for no other reason than because you're trying to pander to some small group,
yeah,
no one else, you know, just give us a good movie,
yeah.
right?
And most of it has absolutely nothing to do with the storyline or
No, of course not. Nothing. It's
just,
just pure jamming it in. It's like they went to an AI thing and said, "Here's my story. Now cram a bunch of woke stuff in it and rewrite it for me."
yeah. I,
And
I do. I think that Americans, by and large, this is a big part of why people are fed up with
yeah, people
this.
are tired of it.
They're done
You,
with this wokeness and, you
you
know,
overplayed your hand, right?
yeah,
And it just goes for lots of things. You overplayed your hand, right? And I'll say that about anything. It's like there back in the 80s, there was Jerry Falwell's Moral Majority, right?
mm,
But he overplayed his hand. He got too involved in stuff and turned people against it,
yeah,
right? Because that's what happens when you overplay your hand, when you call out everything that
yeah,
you don't like. And it's like, just state your point and then go away,
yeah,
right? And either people want it or don't want it, so be it, right? And I make a point, this is a part of a chapter in the book, is talking about like, and we've mentioned it on previous podcasts, that stuff didn't matter to us when we were kids. Nobody
yeah,
cared. It didn't care. We were equal opportunity people. We would make fun of everybody the same, treat everybody the same, didn't
right,
care.
yeah,
Hey, did you know Michael Jackson was black? No one ever said that. Who
no,
cared? It didn't matter. He's the king of pop, right? What difference does it make? It
yeah,
didn't matter.
right,
That this is just like we just didn't talk like that. It wasn't forced into every conversation and everything that we did. It just didn't matter. You had Magic Johnson, but you had Larry Bird, right? There was balance. Well, what difference is it? Who cared what one was white and one was black? Nobody cared.
uh,
They were
yeah,
both good basketball players, and it was fun watching them play against each other. Why
yeah,
can't we just have that?
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's jammed into every single little thing, and the other problem is the left doesn't learn from their mistakes.
Yeah,
They
that's the thing.
they keep dropping the ball and kicking it. I mean, when you've got a vast majority of Americans voting one way, and they're communicating to you, "Hey, what you're doing is garbage. You better," and yet they still just keep marching to the same drum that they're beating, that they're marching to with all this stuff.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
might want to adjust your tactic, right?
yeah,
You're losing in the court of public opinion.
yeah,
And, I've heard some, dyed in the hard liberals say, my party has left me, right? I thought it used to be about X, Y, and Z. And now those things are never even talked about. We're off on to, you know, loony bin stuff,
yeah,
right? Nonstop. Like we talked about it last time. How can you argue against trying to stop fraud and abuse of taxpayer money? There is no argument,
yeah,
right? Zero. You have zero argument and no one will listen to you.
yeah.
No, we need to keep that fraud in place. And
Right.
anyone who tries to expose that fraud must be ridiculous, right?
Yeah, or the whole tariffs, the outrage that you heard about, all the tariffs are gonna, the price of everything is just gonna go up so high. And you had Schumer with the what avocados and the
Yeah, and
chip.
the corona or whatever. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
like,
enjoy your Super Bowl without guacamole. And
yeah, it's like,
are
oh
you
gee, we're that shallow.
are you kidding me? Like how much of a clown are you going to
Yeah, you
become?
sound like a clown.
You sound like a clown. I
Yeah.
mean, come on.
It's
It-
like, can we, if whatever the budget is now, it's probably 60% more than it needs to be
yeah,
at a minimum. And I think that's what Musk is saying, right? It's like, look, we're paying 100% of the budget and about 60% of it is anywhere close to being legit. So
yeah,
if you take that 40% off the American taxpayer, we don't need taxes,
you're right.
right? Nobody needs to pay any taxes for anything. You could make that up with tariffs and you wouldn't think if you didn't pay any taxes. If you make $100,000, about 40,000 goes to taxes. That includes federal, state, FICA, sales tax, property tax, car tags, everything, all totaled. It's about 40% of what you make is tax. So you
Hmm.
make 60. Now, I give you back that 40. Yeah, but there's tariffs and my car costs $1,000 more. Right, but you have $40,000 more in which to use to pay for that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't you get it? Like, oh, avocados cost 10 cents more per avocado. Right, but you have $40,000 to account for the 20 avocados you buy each year that cost $2,
Right. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
did you see uh it was Honda, I think it was today, said they're going to build Honda Civics in Indiana now because they fear the tariff.
That's amazing.
You're already winning,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
how many jobs they make 25,000 Civics every year. How many auto workers did we just get hired in Indiana with good paying jobs because Trump said we're going to put tariffs on car imports
Yeah. They're making announcements like every day about
every day?
investing $500 billion. What was it? Apple investing 500 billion.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that people don't realize.
No, they don't. That's the thing. You've been so conditioned
Yeah.
to not understand economics because you listen to, you know, journalism people who are writing these stories and reading teleprompters on TV networks telling you what to think about everything rather than, kind of understanding how economics works,
Right.
right? I
You know,
think
you're,
everybody should have to take an economics course.
yeah.
Because once you do and you understand how markets work and how a tariff would work and how it worked in the past, and
Yeah.
oh, by the way, did you know that every country tariffs us? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how it works, right? They do.
And they explain it that China devalues their currency, and specifically to give them a tremendous advantage over us. Well, fine, we just raise the tariff and we're equal. I mean,
Yeah.
problem solved. This is
And how
solved.
many and how many people out there, if you're watching this, you love that your products come from China because they're so well made.
Yeah, right.
Who
Yeah,
says that?
No,
Nobody,
no.
right? Everybody complains. Why is everything at Walmart made in China?
Yeah.
Because you want cheap crap that doesn't last.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I agree. You know what? The other thing too is everybody hates us, right? I mean, you think about it. What are we doing? Spending all trillions of dollars, wasting it, throwing it to these other countries. The Middle East hates us outside of
they hate
Israel.
us anyway. So what difference does it make?
China, Russia, Canada. I mean, Canada,
They're
if you
booing our national anthem.
they're booing our anthem, you can hear the murmurings coming from them. Mexico, I mean, the whole world is jealous or upset and
They're
doesn't like.
jealous.
So we've got to do what's in our best interest, and to see this being done is it's so refreshing. Um,
I've
but
never seen it in my lifetime,
no,
right? I've never seen an honest effort to actually change the dynamic
right,
100%. It's never happened. We're Politics has been so corrupt. And people will say, hey, well, there's going to be Republicans on the Diddy list and on the Epstein list, and there's going to be Republicans who are taking money from U.S. aid and everything. Yep. And I want them weeded out just like anybody else,
yeah,
right? I could care less about your political party. If you're defrauding
right,
me as a taxpayer, I want you gone. I
right,
want you punished. And I want the punishment to be so that no one ever thinks or dreams of doing it ever again.
yeah,
Right. And let the chips fall where they may. Like,
yeah,
I really don't care. And I don't know anybody who thinks other than that. From the right, everybody is okay with, hey, yeah, if it's some of our people that we know or that we've liked in the past, and they're found out to be part of the problem, good. We found them out, get rid of them.
yeah,
Got no problem with that, right?
yeah, yeah. It's exciting. It's fun TV to watch too because
Yeah.
it seems like we're getting a lot more good news each day. Things are finding, problems are solving. Uh,
And to those people, if you hate Trump and you hate Elon and you hate conservatives and you hate 52% of the country, stop hating, right? Stop hating, and stop thinking that you're the person who loves everyone. No, you go on social media and scream and yell and have a mental breakdown on your post. You don't love anybody. And the reason why, people, is because you don't love yourself,
right, right.
right?
You
All
know,
right.
the one thing real quick that I'll say
Yeah.
is I think one of the biggest things is people have taken their party and they made that like a sports team where
Yeah.
what you are going for your team no matter how bad they are, no matter how wrong they are, whatever. That's your live and die uh, team. And unfortunately, I think as a Gen Xer, if all the same principles and everything swapped and it was the left that was doing this, I would be all on board with the left.
Yeah. If they were finding fraud and
Yeah,
uncovering it and trying to reduce the size of government and everything, I'd be like, go for it. This
yeah,
is great. I have no problem with it. And it's funny because that you mentioned that too. I remember a few years back when there was a Milwaukee Brewer. He won the MVP, but he was doping, and so he got banned for a season. And when he came back the next season, all of the fans in Milwaukee, yay, our hero, Mr. Braun, is back. He cheated and he
right.
tainted your whole season.
Lied
And
about it.
he lied about it. And he had other famous athletes who shall remain nameless from the state of Wisconsin at the
Yeah,
time support him. And you all welcomed him back. Yay, he's our hero. He was a lying cheater,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
still supported him. And I said at the time, if a player on my team was a lying cheater, I would want him to get fired and never play again. And I don't care if that hurt my team. I don't want a lying cheater on one of my teams.
right. Yeah, yeah, that's true.
there's no way I'm cheering for him, right? And it's like when we see bad guys on sports teams, I want them off my team.
Hmm.
And uh, I don't care if it hurts the team. I'm not supporting somebody like that.
Yeah.
Right. So it was interesting too. They did a survey. I don't know if you saw that the NFL Players Association did their annual survey of players, and the top two teams across, I don't know, six different metrics as voted by the players were the Miami Dolphins and the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
And they received all A's and a bunch of A pluses. Both of those two teams, I think, stood out among every other team in terms of the players said it's a great experience,
Hmm.
right? Which is kind of interesting. And even the Raiders were up there in the top five, I think, which I think probably surprised a lot of people because everybody kind of pans that organization because
Uh,
they make bad decisions. But apparently, according to the players, it's a pretty thing. The last place, number 32, with multiple F's and D's, was our local team, the Arizona Cardinals.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to hear Bidwell go out there and try to, say what a great organization he's running and everything. The players hate you.
Yeah. And it's telling when you don't even take care of the families and the
Yeah, the
wives.
families was like an F.
Yeah. That's very telling. Very telling.
And it come free agency period, players pay attention to that crap,
Yeah.
right? Hey, you're going to give me an extra million and you don't treat the families well. I'll take 1 million less and go play for Miami for crying
Yeah.
out loud, right? Like,
Yeah.
you'd be stupid not to do that.
Well, and remember
So,
charging people, they were charging the players to for Gatorade and things when they were working out.
just
That they're
unbelievable.
charging them. You know, they had to pay for their own Gatorade.
It's just crazy. And it's like our stadium's not that old. And
Oh,
they're like, it's the worst weight room in the NFL. How
yeah,
is that possible?
right, right. Yeah,
We don't have the oldest stadium in the NFL. So why is
yeah,
I mean, kind of unbelievable in some respects, right?
yeah,
All
yeah.
right, so I got questions for you, Brady.
Okay.
Uh, when I was writing the book, I was thinking about this too. What do you remember about sports on TV when you were a kid?
Well, sports on TV, you had to be there. So,
Yeah, that's the big thing, right?
yeah, you couldn't record it. We didn't have a VCR, so if you missed it, you missed it. And I remember because we did go to church on Sunday nights as well. And I remember playoff basketball where the Pistons were playing like game 4, and we're like, oh, just waiting for
Yeah.
before you leave. You had to leave. But yeah, I remember. Uh,
You couldn't record it, and if you missed it, you missed it. Exactly.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, that was it. If you gotta go, if you have to go to the bathroom, you gotta go fast because
Yeah, go at halftime. And then what about kind of a follow-up? What about the highlights?
highlights. Gosh, highlights. You'd wait till the evenings with the news. At least if I remember, that's kind of when they would show the highlights of the game. If you ended up missing the game, you'd see it
Yeah,
then.
local news, right? Like they would have a couple of minutes during the sports section on Sunday nights. But here's the thing. Most of the NFL season is during the school year. And when you're 8 and 9 years old, your parents aren't letting you stay up till 10:22 when the
Right?
sports highlights come on, right?
Yeah.
But you might make it, at least in the central time zone, Monday night football with Howard Cosell would do highlights of
Yeah.
the Sunday games, right? So if you could convince your parents to let you stay up till about 8:30 or 8:45 during the Monday night game, you could see some highlights.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for the East Coast people because you probably, when you were 8, your parents weren't letting you stay up till 9:45,
Right.
right? Like I remember my parents, I'd be watching a Vikings game on Monday night, and they would at some point say, "You got to go to bed," like at halfway during the third quarter.
Yeah.
And then how do you find out what the score is? Because most newspapers didn't even get the Monday night score final in the paper for the 6 a.m. when they drop it off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So if your family got the evening paper or you listened to the radio the next day
Yeah.
or something, you didn't even know what the score was.
Yeah. Yeah. I
There
think
was
I,
literally no way to find out what the score of the game was last night until you saw it in the paper.
yeah. And I remember like watching the Red Wings play. If it went into overtime, you'd have to go to bed and you'd wake up and you'd have no idea who won the game.
No,
Like
you're
you know,
like some kid whose dad stayed up late, told him what the score was, right? You know,
right.
my dad went to bed at 9 o'clock. He was up at like 5 o'clock every morning, so he didn't know. Dad, who won the Vikings game last night? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I went to bed at 9. It was 10-7 when it was like,
Yeah.
and there's no recording, and then there's no highlights the rest of the week, right? And so if you missed it and you missed the highlights, that was it. You never saw what happened in that game, not ever.
That's right. Yeah.
Until NFL Films came out with, some end of the year thing and maybe, there was some highlights or something, but it's amazing that anybody could even be a sports fan in the 70s.
Yeah. It wasn't easy.
There was NBA games I remember on Sunday afternoon a lot.
Hmm.
Uh, when the NFL was over, like now, there would be Sunday afternoon NBA games.
Right.
Um, and then there was Wide World of Sports on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And who knows? It was barrel jumping and downhill skiing and, skeet
Yeah.
shooting, whatever else was on that show.
Yeah.
Uh, I remember I was telling my son this, who plays soccer, I was telling him that the World Cup, they would always tell you 2 billion people around the world will be watching the World Cup. Here's how the World Cup was broadcast in the US in the 70s. It was on Wide World of Sports and it was an hour long and they edited out the boring parts, right? So, you'd watch the first 5 minutes and then we now join the broadcast a little bit later, and it's like you're in the second half already and it's 1-0, and it's like that was it. That was
Yeah.
the World Cup final. That was it. You didn't get to see anything else. You saw 1 hour of whatever they edited together to show you the World Cup.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the day. It was a weird world when it came to sports, right?
Yeah. That
So what
took,
about, did you have cable TV?
we did. Yeah, we did. But
Like
we,
your whole life, do you remember? Or
no, when I was little, we didn't. But eventually, when I was in that 10, 11-year-old range, we had, I want to say like 20, maybe
yeah,
20 channels. It wasn't a ton, but we had more than just the three
yeah,
antenna uh,
yeah.
ears.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't get cable until junior high because we moved to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And of course, there was like one channel in a
Yeah.
town like that, right? And so you had to get cable you would get the Minneapolis stations, right? So
Yeah.
for major sports, you had the major networks in Minneapolis. So we got same thing, 24, 25 channels, maybe TBS, USA, ESPN.
Yeah.
Um, and then, once a year you get the free weekend of HBO and you hope that your parents were gone that night and you could watch a movie and that's the other thing. The movie was in the theater. And if you didn't see it in the theater, you waited 5 years until it was on the ABC Sunday night movie.
Right. Yeah.
When I was a kid, there was no other way to see a movie.
Yeah.
There wasn't HBO and there was not VHS tapes and Blockbuster.
That's
That
right.
didn't come along until I was in high school, I think. Did we ever go to a Blockbuster or something, right?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to see movies, it was the ABC Sunday Night Movie or it was free weekend of HBO.
Yeah.
That's how you saw a movie, right?
I think the movie experience back when I was young was so much better.
Oh
To be,
yeah.
it was exciting. It was fun. The whole audience was along for this ride together,
Yeah.
would clap at the end, or it just was so much more innocent and a fun experience. Yeah,
And
that's
you'd look up the listings, in the paper. Hey, what's showing at the Cineplex, right? And
yeah.
you'd go and you'd look up the movies, or as a lot of people did back. I remember like my family, hey, let's go to a movie. Okay. So we get in the car and we go to the movie theater and look at the thing, what's showing. And then
Mm,
we decide by looking at the thing, oh, that one's PG. I guess we could go see that.
mm.
No idea what it was or who was in it or anything. It was just let's go to a movie and
Yeah,
then we'll find something when we get there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we saw some crap because of it, right? And my parents walked out of a couple movies and it's like, why didn't you look it up? Right. And they were too naive. They're like, well, I don't know. People said Midnight Cowboy was a good movie. It was rated X at the time, right? It's like whatever, So I think Exorcist, it's got a religious. If there's a priest in it, it must be good, right?
yeah.
It's like just dumb, right? Like, last question for you is, did you have any bad girlfriend breakups like in high school or anything?
Oh gosh, bad breakups. Well, let's see. You know, there's never a good breakup.
Yeah.
Never good. There really isn't. I can't think of any horrific, lock the door at night.
Yeah. Don't answer the phone. Take the phone off the hook.
Yeah, nothing violent or too crazy. Yeah, yeah, but those are never fun. It's not you. It's me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you gave him the it's not you, it's me.
Yeah. Well,
Listen, Brady, if it's anybody, it's me.
you're darn right it's
You're
me.
darn right it's you. All
Oh,
right, what questions you got for me?
oh, right. Mine are a little more sports related. Did you have a hated professional athlete player when you were a kid growing up watching sports, any sport, baseball, football, basketball, a hated player that you just despised when you were a kid?
Yeah, um, that's interesting, because it's like when it was the Vikings, it's like I hated the guys who we played in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl, right? So Roger Staubach,
Mm,
right? Because he beat us in a NFC Championship game with a offensive pass interference that wasn't called.
mm,
It's still bitter. Vikings fans from the 70s, that play is still bitter. Like it's memorized in our head.
yeah,
Uh, so I didn't like Roger Staubach. And it's funny because back in the day, it's like when I was a kid, I didn't hate the Packers or any of their players. They weren't any good.
yeah,
Like they were like a nothing to the Vikings for almost all of the 70s,
yeah,
right? Like they didn't have anybody good, so it was like that didn't matter. Um, I hated McMahon from the Bears
yeah. Is
during
good.
that Super Bowl run year and some stuff. Um, I didn't hate Walter Payton. I mean, how can you hate Walter Payton? That stuff. I didn't hate Barry Sanders. How can you hate Barry? I mean, there's certain guys, even if they were on your rival, the dude ain't good, right?
Yeah,
Jerry Rice,
yeah,
he could pick your team apart and you just would go, geez, that guy's good, right? Like, it's like, what are you going to do?
yeah,
Um, I can't think of anybody from a football standpoint. I don't think that I really hated baseball. Um, I hated the Yankees as a team. So I didn't like their players most of
yeah.
the time. That was like Reggie Jackson and Mickey Rivers and Thurman Thomas and some of those guys. Uh, I didn't like them,
Mhm.
but I can't think. It wasn't so much players when I was a kid.
Yeah,
It was the team, and that's the thing. That's the difference, right? Because Players didn't switch teams. Like
Right.
when I was a kid, that there was no free agency. When I was a kid, there was no free agency.
That's right.
So you
Right.
get drafted, unless you get traded, you're playing for that team for the rest of your career. Like
Yeah.
most of the players on the Vikings that I was a fan of played virtually their entire career with the Vikings.
Yeah.
So, and in baseball, there was a little bit of that, but not a lot, as well.
Yeah. It,
Um,
you know,
Hockey, I mean, I hated the Blackhawks. As a North Stars fan, I hated the Blackhawks. I don't remember most of the players.
yeah.
Um, Trying to think what else, but yeah, I can't think of anybody that particularly stands out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. But you're right. You did. I mean, Larry Bird was a Celtic. You knew he wasn't going to be bouncing other teams. Magic Johnson was going to be a Laker. We didn't
yeah,
have that. Even Jordan's, going to the Wizards and doing all that. You could just see where the change started happening, and that changed sports quite a bit.
yeah. And it's like I wasn't a Michael Jordan fan, at the time. I didn't like the Bulls and all that, but it's the same thing with like Jerry Rice or whatever, or Gretzky. He wasn't on the team that I liked and
Yeah.
actually beat the North Stars in the Stanley Cup one year. And it's like, but what are you going to do?
Right. Yeah.
It's the best player you've ever seen. Like, it's hard to hate a guy like that, right?
Yeah.
You got to kind of give them their due. I probably hated some Olympic people, right, from Russia or East Germany or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
Something like that. But yeah, I think it's different today because of fantasy stuff
Yeah.
and whatnot. And I hate plenty of players today,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I hate Aaron Rodgers and I have since day one. There's a lot of players that I dislike
Yeah.
now. And it's usually because of their attitude or they play on a team that I don't like or whatever. I've got, at first I was okay with Mahomes, but now he just irritates me,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I don't,
He's won too much.
nah, it's too much. Like when people get a little bit too big for their britches, it's like, nah, go away. I don't want
Yeah.
to hear about you anymore.
Yeah. It's hard not to root against him.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, your favorite Major League Baseball pitcher growing up, did you have one all-time favorite pitcher that you just really loved? Could be a twin.
Yeah. I mean, if I go way back, way back to like the 70s, there was a pitcher for the Twins. He was like their only good pitcher for a few years. His name was Dave Goltz. You'd have
Hmm.
to look him up, but um, and then Burt Blyleven he did two stints with the Twins, right? He played for them in the 70s and then he came back and won a World Series with them in the 80s, which was pretty cool,
Yeah.
right?
He's good.
Um, he was a good pitcher. And oh, there goes my video game. He was a good pitcher and a good fun guy too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got any more for me? Hang on, I'm gonna press pause again. Any more questions for me then, Brady?
That's it. That's all I could
All
come up.
right. All right. And our producer's probably telling us that we need to wrap things up here on a Monday night. It's weird on Monday nights now because it's like, what do you got to do? There's nothing on,
That's right.
right? It's like there's no Monday night football.
Yeah.
What do you got to do? It's weird. Like there was the combine, I guess, and there were some interesting things that happened at the combine. Um, things with that. NFL stretches it out, right? The draft is next month. So now we got a month of talking about drafts. We're getting close to the end of college basketball season.
Yep.
Couple games left, and then tournament championships next weekend. My team, Iowa State, is ranked 10th. They've been ranked now over the course of the last two seasons, 25 straight weeks in the top 10
Hmm.
and 18 in a row this year. And somebody put together the numbers. All of the Big Ten combined has only been in the top 10 13 times this
Wow.
season. and Iowa State has been 18 times by themselves.
Wow.
Against all of the 18 teams of the Big Ten, they've only been in the top 10 13 times thus this season, which is pretty
Yeah.
amazing, right? And for some whatever reason, the SEC is good in basketball
Yeah.
now, and like the ACC, I mean, they still have a couple of good teams and everything, but it's just not the same.
Yeah.
And it should be an interesting tournament, right? I think
Yeah.
it will be an interesting tournament.
Wide open. Yeah.
It's wide open, and I would say Houston. I just looked at their record today. I mean, they've got a great record, and they have not lost on the road,
Mm.
and they've only lost once at home, and then they've got 3 losses or whatever on a neutral court. So that's interesting come playoff time, right? You don't
Yeah.
lose on the road, but you lose on neutral courts.
Yeah.
So you're going to be playing on neutral courts come
Right.
playoffs, right? So it's like I don't know. It's the other way around for Iowa State. They win every game at home. They've lost road games. They've only lost one neutral court game. So we shall see. They always call now, everybody in the Big 12 and Iowa State always says they play the games in Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament. I don't know if that's changed now with the new teams being introduced and everything,
Mm.
but they always call that Hilton South
Hmm.
because Iowa State plays really well there and the whole university comes down and watches them, and it's like a home game.
Oh, that's cool.
And last year they beat the number one seeded Houston by like 30
Hmm.
in the Big 12 tournament. So we'll see. They're probably going to end up meeting again
Yeah.
in that this year. We shall see, right? College basketball, like college football, to me is great. It's exciting.
Mhm.
Um, to me, it's better than professional sports in a lot of ways, just because it's kids, and maybe that's going to go away with all this NIL money, but it's like it's still exciting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my son loves it too. All
Yeah.
right, everybody. Remember to hit like and subscribe. You can watch us on YouTube or Spotify. You can listen to us in the car on Amazon Music. You can listen to us like all sorts of different places, right? It's amazing. We have a Twitter feed. We got so much stuff. We got so many places you can watch us and pay attention to us. It's hard to keep track of all of them. iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Also, just announced this week we are on UHF channel 75 in Muncie, Indiana.
Muncie. All right.
So wow, that's big time. That
Yeah.
they actually have some people in Muncie, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's exciting. So for Brady and myself and our producer, we thank you again for joining us on the GenX Rewind podcast. And we just, we want you to have fun and we want you to go out and enjoy life and yourself, but just be home before the street lights come on, right?
That's
All right.
right.
All right. We'll see you, Brady. Good talking to you again.
Talking
So
to
long, everybody.
you. Bye bye.